Someday is one of the most comforting words in the human vocabulary. Someday I will slow down. Someday I will travel. Someday I will fix that relationship. Someday I will start the thing I keep thinking about. But what if someday is not a plan? What if someday is the quiet story we tell ourselves to avoid making a decision today?
And that is what we're going to explore today. Because almost everyone has a version of someday living in their mind. It is the future where life will finally settle down, or where there'll be enough time, enough money, maybe enough clarity to do the things that really matter. The problem is that someday has a way of moving.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined. They're built, brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome to the Big Life. I am Neal Oates Jr., and I'm really glad that you are here with us today. This podcast is the place where we slow down long enough to think clearly about life, leadership, and the choices that quietly shape the direction of our lives. Robin, this topic touches almost everyone. I do not think there is a single person who has not used the word someday to describe something meaningful they intend to do.
Neal, that is so true. And I just want to say a quick welcome to our family of listeners today. We're so glad you're here with us. And Neal, someday is interesting because it sounds hopeful, right? It sounds positive. It sounds responsible even. But when someone says someday, they usually mean it sincerely. They believe that they will get around to it. And I'm using the word they, and I can put I in there, right? But sincerity and action are not the same thing, right? That gap between the sincerity and the action is where where meaningful parts of our lives slowly disappear. And that's worthy of our consideration.
And that's a hard thing for you to say. It slowly disappears. So someday often shows up in areas that matter the most. And here's what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Someday I will spend more time with my family. Someday I will take better care of my health and this body that God has given me. Someday I will pursue that idea that keeps showing up in my mind. Someday I will repair that relationship that has been strained. And none of those things sound unreasonable. In fact, they sound wise, but someday becomes dangerous when it becomes indefinite. Wouldn't you agree, Robin?
Certainly. I remember my mentor saying to me at one time that I don't see someday on the calendar anywhere, right? I see Monday, I see Tuesday, I see Saturday, but I don't see someday. So someday is rarely connected to a date. Someday is not next month. Someday is not next year. Someday is not after this season. Someday is far enough away that we do not have to deal with it today. And that makes it very comfortable. So someday makes it comfortable for us, right, Neal?
And Robin, when I hear you say comfortable, I hear comfortable, but I also hear costly. Because while someday feels harmless, while we feel that way, life does not pause while we wait for someday to arrive. Life continues moving. Seasons change, opportunities pass, relationships evolve, and the reality is that many of the things people plan to do someday require something that cannot be postponed, and that is presence. You cannot be present later for moments that have already passed.
Wow. And that is one of the most difficult realizations that people encounter later in life. We realize that What we postponed was not just an activity, it was an experience. And you can earn more money, you can start new projects later on, but there are certain seasons of our lives that are not replaceable, right? Children grow up, grandchildren grow up, parents grow older, energy changes, circumstances shift, and someday oftentimes assumes that the conditions of today will exist later. But the point is that many times they don't.
Robin, you just mentioned the word that someday assumes, right? So every time I think about tomorrow, I'm always thinking, am I so arrogant that I believe I have a tomorrow? Right. And there's another side to this as well. Someday is not only about relationships or experiences, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes it's about the work people feel called to do. There are people listening who have an idea they've been carrying for years. I'm going to dare say decades. Maybe a book they want to write, a project, as Robin just mentioned, that they want to start, a business they want to build, and a great cause that they want to support. And every year, year after year, the same thought appears. I will get to it someday.
Have you thought of that, listeners? I'm sure by now something has come to mind that maybe you've been saying someday too. And part of the reason that we delay meaningful work is not laziness. We're not lazy. In most cases, it's uncertainty. When something matters deeply, something that we care about, then the risk feels larger. And so the possibility of failure feels more personal. And so we protect ourselves by postponing the attempt. And someday becomes a way to keep the dream alive without facing the discomfort of beginning.
Wow, Robin, you talk about a powerful observation. That's exactly what you just shared here. Because here's what happens. Beginning exposes us, and we do not like to be exposed. Beginning means the idea is no longer hypothetical. It becomes real. And real things can either succeed or fail. But here is the irony that we're talking about. The longer that we postpone beginning, the heavier the idea becomes. It sits in the background of our thinking. It quietly remains, or it quietly reminds us that something meaningful has not yet been attempted, and it just lingers there.
Exactly. And so what happens over time is that reminder can turn into regret.
Mm-hmm.
Not dramatic regret, but sort of a quiet regret, because we keep putting it off. What happens is that when we get to a point in life and we reflect on the years behind us and we realize how many opportunities were perhaps delayed by waiting for that right moment. And the truth is that that right moment rarely arrives. And sometimes we can't really see that until we actually look back. And so I want our listeners who might be a little bit younger than Robin today to pay attention to this one, because it can happen just like that. It just kind of goes on. Someday continues. And then we look back and realize, my goodness, we
All right,
haven't done this.
Robin, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to say, just so that our listeners hear it, meaning that Neal hears it again, Neal, that perfect moment is not going to arrive. It rarely arrives. So life rarely becomes simple enough, calm enough, or predictable enough for everything to align perfectly. Are you listening, Neal? And the reason I'm asking myself is because I keep waiting for the right moment, the perfect moment, when things are easier, when they're calmer, when they're simpler, when they're more predictable, and it has not happened yet. But people who eventually do meaningful things usually start in imperfect circumstances, imperfect timing, imperfect environments. They begin while things are still busy, while things are still uncertain, while they are still learning, while life is still happening all around them.
Exactly. That raises a very important question then, is that if someday is not reliable, then what should we replace it with? And the answer is intentionality. Instead of someday, the question becomes, what can I begin now? Even in a small way. Now your vision is just the first step. And so someday becomes, what can I begin today? What can I do right now?
And so I hear you say that, and I know we're speaking to an audience of achievers, high performers, those who are chasing after, who want the big life. But I want to remind you that small beginnings matter more than dramatic intentions. And so when we talk about small beginnings, a single conversation, a single page of your book written, a single step towards better health, a single effort to reconnect with someone, those small, seemingly insignificant actions break the illusion that meaningful change requires a perfect moment. So often it's simply requires movement. Just what movement, what forward progress, what small step can you take today, as Robin mentioned, to start the journey? We don't need the entire vision, just one small step.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because, like, we can state it very clearly by saying movement creates clarity. So as we take the action, we get more clarity. Many people believe that they need clarity before they begin. And I've been there. But in reality, clarity often shows up after we take the action. And you start something small, you learn something by starting that whatever small step that you take, and then you adjust. And then the next step becomes a little bit more clear. And that's kind of how it works. Progress usually isn't linear. It's a process of learning and applying and adjusting and growing. And that's how we progress in life anyway.
And so, Robin, as you say that progress is a process, that's the part that many of us are like, ooh, we know it's true, but I sure do hope that I'm the exception. Oh, I'm praying instead of me having a process, God, just do it like this right here. And there is something else that happens when people replace someday with action. And we talk about this process of progressing, and that requires action. Their relationship with time changes. And as we are recording this, we just moved our clocks ahead. So our relationship with time changed, maybe in a negative or positive way, depending on whether you like the spring forward or not. But your relationship with time changes. Instead of assuming there will always be another opportunity, we begin to value the opportunities that exist right now. We start asking better questions. What matters today? What conversations should not be delayed? What experiences deserve attention right now? So when our relationships change, our focus changes, our questions change, and therefore our actions must change.
Neal just said what the questions that we ask, like what matters today? What conversation should we have today that shouldn't be delayed? What experience deserves my attention right now? Those type questions bring life back into focus. That's what we're suggesting, because when people think that everything can happen later, then the present becomes less meaningful. But when we recognize that today matters, our attention changes, our priorities change, and therefore our decisions change. It's so important, Neal, what you just shared.
So I know you didn't intend this, Robin, but when you said today matters, of course, I go straight to Dr. John Maxwell's book, Today Matters, and he talks about the small things that we do today and the impact it's going to have on lives. I'm going to say on generations. And so when we ask those questions, it also brings gratitude. When people stop postponing life and saying someday, later, next, whatever that is, they often rediscover how much opportunity already exists around us. We start looking to our left and our right and say things aren't as bad as we thought they were. And so those opportunities could be relationships, they could be conversations, they could be ideas. The one that I love are the experiences. And so things that once seemed ordinary, suddenly they feel valuable again. We have a new meaning tied to those items.
I love it. I love it. I think there's also a certain amount of freedom that comes when we make this shift. When somebody releases the illusion of someday, they stop carrying the pressure of an imagined future where everything finally works out perfectly. We stop carrying that pressure that comes along with that. And instead, we engage in the present with honesty and we are truly present. And life becomes less about waiting and more about participating, right?
So, Robin, when you talk about there, instead of waiting, we're participating. When I think about participating in sports and life, I have tried to learn. I've sat on the sidelines of life and in sports, and I'm like, okay, when I get better, I'll be ready. But participation is where meaning grows. So when I'm in this thing, when I am doing it, when I'm maybe failing forward, that's when my meaning grows, my understanding. And meaning is rarely found in distant plans. I know we must plan. Ladies and gentlemen, Robin and I are not here on The Big Life telling you not to plan, but we are telling you that meaning, like life or relationships or business or ideas, very rarely is the meaning around that going to be found in distant plans, that 5-10 year plan or that someday goal. It is found in daily engagement with your people, with your work and opportunities in front of you. And so that engagement with the relationships, with the work, with the people, with the ideas, that creates a life that feels full and big. We live the big life here rather than postponed and delayed.
I love it, man. It reminds me of something my mentor used to say, that life is the curriculum, right? Life is the curriculum. And what we're saying today, what Neal just said, reiterates that we find the answers, we grow in the daily engagement, not in the distant plans. And so if someone is listening today recognizes that they have been living with a few too many someday plans, we want to provide for you a simple little invitation for you to do this week. You can start this today. And what we want to do is we want to invite you to choose one thing. That's the point. Choose one thing. That could be one conversation that you've been postponing, right? That could be one step towards a project that you care deeply about that maybe you've been putting off. What's one step towards a project that you can take? What's one decision that moves something meaningful forward? So choose one thing. We're encouraging you to choose one thing. I shared this with somebody the other day, and they came back to me and reported how they took one step and how in taking that one step, it was towards creating something that would serve their community. And in taking that one step, it led to another thing, another door being open. And they found somebody who actually has the same passion as theirs. And somebody could now also work along with them to move this thing forward. And the point is that they just took one step and it led to another step and another step. And so not someday, but choose one thing and start it today.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you just hear what Robin said? He didn't just say choose it today, but then also start it. So begin, not begin it someday. So you don't get the luxury of choosing today and starting it someday. You're going to choose, then you're going to begin today. Because the truth is that someday is not a real place on the calendar. Ouch, Neal. Today is. And the life that we hope to experience eventually through the decisions we make now, the decisions we make today, that's going to determine the quality and the fullness of this big life that we're searching for.
And so we're so grateful that you spent this time with us today. And this is not a eye-opening thought that we're sharing today. And we know that you've heard this before, but we still have those some days. And so we're sharing with you today so that you could choose that one thing. That's what we want you to take away from this. Choose one thing and start it today. I know you know this, and I know you don't have all the answers, and you don't need to have all the answers. Trust us when we say this. In fact, I can almost guarantee that taking that one step will lead you to another step. And if you take that next step, That's going to lead you to another step. And then you take another step. And before you know it, you're way beyond where you were if you left it for someday. So we're so glad that you're here with us today, and we want to hear from you. Please share. Maybe there's something like I shared with a friend of mine recently, and they came back and shared how that one step and what it led to, and how excited they were that they took that one step, and how eye-opening it was. And so you, our listeners, please share as you take that one step, as you get bold and take that one step. We encourage you to share with us. Give us your feedback.
And you can do that by going to the show notes or the description. The contact info for Robin Lewis, Neal Oates Jr. is there. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share this episode with someone that you care about so that they don't grab hold and they don't value the lie of someday, that they take hold of their todays. Remember that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.